12 o'clock. I hope that didn't make it in.
It didn't. Don't worry. Hey, everybody. They're all going to wonder, what you talking about? Welcome back to another episode of the Oversharing Show.
That we can sing.
What's that?
Next time. You said we should sing on our
We
episode.
should sing. You were singing Bill Haley in the Comets. Rock around the clock. 1, 2, 3, 5, 4 o'clock, rock down. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're going to rock around the show tonight. Oh, yeah. Anyway, how's everybody doing today? What's up, all you guys in our chat?
In the chat, because maybe they're not in the chat, because they're always late, but it's okay.
How dare they?
We don't get mad at them.
I'm going to start taking wrenches away. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. And if you are watching this sometime in the future, make sure you leave a comment, and thanks for watching. We really appreciate it.
Yes, even the unnamed people. And I'm going to shout out to Livy, because she told me this week when I went to a happy hour with her that she was always watching. So shout out to Livy.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we're gonna continue on from episode 14. Last week we had the lovely Alex, aka Olive Tree Bear, on, so we had to kind of pause what we were talking about to talk about what he was talking about. But now we're gonna get to finish our notes and go on to some newer notes that we made. But before we do that, I have a quote I'm gonna read, and Sharon is going to
pull a card.
Yeah. Oh man. Zeralast trying to call me. Sorry, you just got denied. Because I went to look for the quote and then it popped up that he was calling me.
You didn't put your phone on do not disturb like I just did and told.
Well, it's on mute.
Just kidding.
I don't have an iPhone, so
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even have saw it unless I was looking at the quote. Okay, here's our quote today. Besides, if I put it on do not disturb, I'd probably forget and leave it like that for a week and just think no one was calling me. Yeah, I don't. Okay, here's
operate.
Our quote.
I can't operate.
Yeah, I'm just like, I guess no one's calling me. And everyone's like, are you dead? And I'm like, oh, go watch my episode about that. All right, so today's quote is from Rumi, and it is, I died as, yikes, internet. Sorry, I'll try that again. All right. I died as mineral and became a plant. I died as plant and rose to animal. I died as animal and I was human. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? Yet once more I shall die human to soar with angels blessed above. And when I sacrifice my angel soul, I shall become what no mind ever conceived. As human, I will die once more. Reborn, I will with the angels soar. And when I let my angel body go, I shall be more than and when I let my angel body go, I shall be more than mortal man can know. Or mortal mind, sorry, can know. Same thing. And that's by Rumi.
Rumi.
He has some great quotes. That
guy.
Was
he a dude? I don't know why I always thought it was a woman.
Oh.
It sounds girly, like Rumi.
Oh, it just sounds like Middle Eastern to me, I thought.
Yeah, it does. But for some reason, it just sounded like.
Sharon, nobody listens to women. Why would they write their quotes down? They'd be like, shut up. I don't want to hear from a woman. Get a guy in here to give us a quote. Just kidding. Okay, what card did you pull? It's probably going to be like a queen of something now because I said
Holy smokes. How'd you know?
Because I just made fun of women. Oh, it is. We always pull queens anyway on the show for some reason.
Yeah, we do. Queen of Pentacles.
Queen of Pentacles. All right. There we go. That's a really good card.
It's very earthy. It's very groundy. It's very, what do you say?
Very royal. The thing I like about the queens is that it's the highest of the pentacles in the feminine. So it has a lot to do with that. It has a lot to do with nurturing and family and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a good card. I think we're probably going to be talking about some of those concepts a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, you said like royalty. You said like what else did you say? What you call it? It reminded me of, funny enough, sorry, I'm looking for my thing here. the mala that my friend made me, well, she made two, right? Well, she didn't make them for me. She didn't realize she was making them for me. When I saw them, I knew they were mine. I was like, ooh, I like those. And no other mala. I was like, not really interested. But those two like really called to me. So anyway, one of them was about, yes, the rose quartz one, which I don't have them on me, but the rose quartz one was, it said some of the things associated was like royalty, abundance, grounding, truth, balancing from the heart down, and water/weather bearer. So those were the things associated with that. So Queen of Pentacles is like you just said, royalty. I would say grounding because of the earth, the earthiness of it, and the abundance because it's a pentacle. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I like that. It's pretty synchronistic for you.
It totally is. Like, yeah. So really cool.
Minimize trying to fix my screens here so I can read my notes too. All right, awesome. Perfect. Why is my computer being so silly right now? We're being so silly. Anyway, so today, everybody, we're going to continue what we're talking about, like we said, from episode 14. And we're talking about rebirth and cycles and stuff like that, because we had talked about death on episode 13 and 13.13. So today we're going to talk about history. That's what we're going to start off, because that's kind of something we all are familiar with and something we all understand as part of cycles in the physical realm, because they're always saying, if you don't know history, you're bound to repeat it, or history repeats itself and all those silly things. So we're going to get into what that exactly could mean as soon as I finish fixing these. Okay, cool. So the big thing now is, history, it's all lie, and it's all
Tartaria.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's probably civilizations before, and all the stuff they're telling us is lies. And I think the way that I look at it, it's kind of like if you looked at what happened in 2020 and the mainstream story about that, like the official story about how this thing came out of China and then it, was here and all these people got sick and all this stuff. There's some of us who used our own eyes and ears to see what was really going on around us, and it didn't seem to exactly match up with the mainstream narrative. So I think history is more like that. It's the mainstream narrative of what happened, like 9/11, like in 200 years or whatever. When people learn about 9/11, they're going to be like, oh, this guy, Osama bin Laden, got really mad and he was able to get his guys to hijack some planes on the same day that the military was running an exercise about planes being hijacked. What? He got lucky with that, I'll tell you. He must have known. Anyway, so maybe he's got a good tarot deck. Oh, look, I pulled a 9 and an 11. We got to do this anyway. So I think that's more of what we're taught in school. And then there's this alternative history. And then, I mean, there's just layers of it. There's so many different things. But I don't think it's so important to know everything. Like, we're taught in school to just, we have to absorb all this knowledge, and you have to know all these dates and these names and all this crazy stuff. And I don't really feel that that's really important. I think what's better is to just, if you don't want to repeat your mistakes and stuff like that, I think it's just better to get an idea of kind of what happened, like a balance, and just to get like again, you can use modern day as kind of like a metaphor or whatever, or a lens to look through about how the past might have been. And you could probably just guess. I mean, I bet you could probably guess what happened, and it's a lot closer to what really happened than what they're saying. But I think, though, the way that we are taught now, we're taught to be like the lies that we learn. There's a lot of reasons. I think a lot of it is that it's disempowering, and you get into like this victim status, and then you also get people kind of get wrapped up in this lore of who they think they are, and it really, at the end of the day, I mean, I think it's hard to argue that it's really just to keep people as good citizens, as good slaves. Maybe we'll get into that, if
Let
you
me
will.
interject, if I
Yeah,
may,
please.
and say that for the record, history was my worst subject because, as everybody knows, I live under a rock, because I really don't seem to care about what's going on in the news and the media. And I guess this was good for me, even as I was growing up, because I didn't do well with history. I didn't like it because it was a memorization of like dates and things and people, and oh, so and so did this on this day, and then this was declared, and so, declared some independence of some sort, and blah blah blah. And to me, it was just all like background noise. I'm like, whatever. I mean, I'm here. What does that matter? So like Brandon was saying, like, it's, you have to have like a balance of like knowing enough history to not repeat it or get caught up in it, or knowing enough, like knowing enough of it that it's probably not true, but at the same time, I don't know, just being aware, I guess, which is me. But like, I really don't know what the official narrative is on much of history, like literally, like I don't know anything, and I really don't care, honestly. But I suppose there's some realm of needing to care a little bit about some of it, but just enough that I know not to repeat it, and just maybe be aware of pitfalls and things like that. Just like one of the things we talked about in a previous episode, which was with the Kalahari Bushmen, is they didn't know that there were people out there who could come and steal their land. So like, had they known that, they could have taught their children, like, okay, look, you don't need to know details about history, but you do need to know to be aware that there could be people out there that are trying to do such and such. So you need to be aware at all times that this can happen. So you're ready to defend your property. And well, I mean, they don't even think of property as property. So like, whatever, you know what I mean?
Their way of life, you could say.
Yeah. Defend your way of life so that you can maintain it and keep it. So yeah, sorry. That's my little interjection there.
No, that's fine. I think it's that's good though, because it's fine though. That's what I was going to say. It's okay because I was a total history nerd. It's one of the only subjects that I consistently always did well in. Wow. I was always interested in that kind of stuff. And I think, the school system, they take advantage of that then, and they just try to jam all this information and this useless knowledge that you need to, in my opinion, that you just need to memorize.
Camps.
Huh?
Indoctrination camps.
Yeah, it just turns into indoctrination. But I'm really glad that I was so interested in history, because now I can take a look at maybe what really was, and then I can compare it, and then I could see how people are able to be controlled and stuff like that. Because now other than history, my other new favorite subject really is psychology, human psychology and group dynamics, and what's the word I'm looking for? Like the collective consciousness, I guess you could say, how people are able to, how a small group of people is able to control a giant, large group of people. It's really interesting to me. So when I look back at history, I could see, oh, this is probably what happened here. This might've been the lie here. Like the Civil War is a great example. Everybody says it was about slavery when, like you can even prove with regular quote unquote mainstream history that it wasn't about slavery. Exactly. That was in there, and that was going on around at the time, but it was really more about people's own greed, I guess you could say, when it came to cotton and money and shipping and all this stuff, or destroying other civilizations that might have been there. I mean, could that have been what was going on too? That's probably what I think too. But I think it's good to learn the truth though, because it is empowering to really realize that it's not all what they said and all these different things. So you don't have to go along with the current psyop or the current, thing that's going on, because you realize that it's just all been basically lies or whatever. And as far as children, I think it's important to give them an idea like we were saying, like you have what might have happened in the past and stuff. But again, the way they do it in school, I'm just totally against, especially because they teach it to you like it's a fact, but it's who really knows. I think if they came at it from the point of view of, well, this is what people wrote down, we think this is what happened, but no, they're like, in 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And now if you look into it, you're like, was Columbus just a name that they use? It could have been a total made up guy because of Columbia and what that all means, and the white dove, and it's like, was he even a real person? So but the big one that we always encounter in this country anyway is the American Revolution. That's like the giant one that everybody knows about. We're a free country. We broke away from the British. We are we all get to enjoy this great freedom unless the government says to cover your face, and then everyone does it. And I think the cool thing about talking about revolutions is it fits right in what we're talking about with cycles and rebirth, because a revolution, it's in the name. It's, think about RPMs in a car. That's revolutions per minute. It's just a cycle. It's just things turning around and stuff. So, and what happened basically, or what we were told anyway, is the old way of governing died. So there's the death concept again. The 13 colonies being ruled by a king died on July 4th, 1776. And then there was a war. And then we were able to establish our own government and, do what we wanted to do. And I think it's funny because 13 is the death card number, right?
13 colonies.
Yeah. So you get 13 colonies. So we have 13 colonies. Everything's going great. There's 10, there's one colony, there's two, everyone's loving the king. And then we get to 13 and all of a sudden they're like, nah, we don't want this king anymore. Right. It's like, oh, okay. Is that a death? So that, I think that might be some symbolism, or maybe it's just the way that things worked, or just the way it worked out because of how this realm is. But also I wanted to bring up lucky 13 because people talk about 13 and it's either a lucky or unlucky number. And I think that it might have to do, the luck part of it could be because you have a death, which is
the end of a cycle.
Yeah, the end of a cycle. So you're lucky because you're breaking out of that old way of seeing things. You're breaking your chains or whatever. And I think that it's funny because that's what we think happened. That's what we're always told. We broke this chain, this yoke of the King George. But then we get George Washington. You get we traded one George for another George. And the funny thing is too, because not far long after the American Revolution was all done, George Washington is marching with an American army to, I think, somewhere in Pennsylvania to put down some kind of, I think it was, they were having a revolution or revolt about taxes. And I think it had to do with alcohol or something. I can't remember exactly. I'm terrible, but so we break free, but then all of a sudden this new thing comes in. It's like, no, it's just new boss, same as the old boss. It's like, wait, what? So I think there you could just kind of prove how it's all a lie, but that's all right. Cause something like that probably did happen, but what was really going on? What were they really doing? Right. People wanted to get rid of, so I think people probably looked at themselves as slaves. There was taxation without representation. You're taking our money and we don't even get a representative. And so I think what happened though, really was people just shifted the way that they were governed and their style of government changed. So I don't think it has anything to do with anyone gaining their freedom. I really feel that people still were slaves. You just basically, you're like, I don't like this form, so we're going to have a revolt. And then this other form, these other people, they're landowners, they're they're rich people at the time. And I'm not saying all the forefathers were in on it, because if you see what some of them allegedly said or whatever, like Samuel Adams, I don't think he was some kind of psyop. But now they have a beer named Sam Adams. It's like, so I think that's what they do to you when you're like a true patriot. They're like, all right, fine. Then later we're just going to put you on beer and have you in these terrible beer commercials.
What you were saying about earlier, or just a few seconds ago, reminded me of what Big Bear was talking about when he was talking about the Hong Kong and Canada, and the asking for more. Was it BB that said that, or was that Crow, or who was saying like you're asking for more things from them, or you're saying, no, change it. We want it this way, but you're still a slave. Like if you're a sovereign, if you're like doing your own thing and you're like, I don't need you, you just opt out. You don't even ask them for anything because they're nothing to you, you know?
Yeah. It's like going to your parents. If you're not happy with the way you're living, you know, you're in high school and you live at your parents and you're like, oh, these rules suck. We need different rules. You're going to the same people who are your masters and you're just asking for a better way to be. And the thing that Owen Benjamin was saying was that in this case, it's hilarious because right-wing revolutions or whatever, right-wing protests, they're always asking for more freedom, whereas the left wing is basically asking for more enslavement. So that's why they don't get, that's why I think that they don't get, that's why, you know, like the Women's March and all this stuff, nobody had a hard time with them. They just let them come because the women were asking for more feminism and more rules and more stuff. So they're like, yeah, this is great. We'll definitely give you more government. Sure. That's what you want. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's just like the same, you know, two wings of the same bird. And then on the right, say they're going to like a gun protest or something where they want to protest gun laws and all this stuff, which is great. You know, you want to keep your freedoms or whatever, but you're still going to these people who you hate to ask them. And it's like, well, why would you even go ask them? Why don't you just go build your own thing or do your own thing or disconnect from that whole thing? And I understand too, there's, you know, you could get thrown in jail and all these different things for just going to do your own thing. But I think there's other ways around it. And if you truly want to be a free person, you kind of have to build your own system or be part of a system where you're actually a sovereign being, I guess, you know, you're not beholden to any silly rules and stuff. And so what I think happened is just like what happened in India, you know, so the British come into India, but they don't come in as this colonizing force. They come in as a merchant force. It's the East India Company, right? They come in and they kind of start taking over basically rulership and all of how everything's done. I mean, people in India they could go to their own ocean, their own sea and just get salt. Like allegedly the salt is just like on the shore. You could just go grab it or whatever. But if you didn't use the British salt, then you were in trouble. So they had to like buy their salt, which was heavily taxed and all this stuff. So after a while, I don't know, was it 150, 200 years or whatever it was of that, they got sick of it. So they started doing all these nonviolent protests, which I believe nonviolent is the way to go. If you're going to do this stuff, it's the best way. But so what happened was Gandhi comes in and he's representing what the people want. Now, most people, it's taught like it was some kind of revolution. Gandhi came in and saved these people. But my point of view, the way I look at it is I see Gandhi is just he's like the next archon. We talked about that in another episode. He's the one between you and the freedom. He's just the next guy to be the big daddy to come in. And he's the one that everybody prefers. So since he was the one that everyone preferred, there was a cycle. There was a revolution that took place. Things got flipped upside down. And now he's the one in control. He's the one in power. And, you know, I mean, it worked out much better for those people in India, I'm sure, because the taxes went down and all this stuff. But India, you know, is still probably, I don't want to talk about India. It's a great place. But the people there, I'm sure, still aren't free. They might feel like they have a little more freedoms or whatever, and a little more leeway and wiggle room and stuff like that. But it was just another government that was installed. And instead of living like free men and women, they're still looking to the government to fix their problems. You know, they still split off in Pakistan, split off, and now they have their own government, and now they're like constantly at war and they hate each other. And I mean, over there, it's crazy. Like the people that run for president, one of them, I think he was the guy that was running to be the president of Pakistan. He had like a picture of him on a nuclear bomb that was like headed to India, you know, like we're going to nuke these people, you know, like, so it goes back to what we were saying about division. They play on people's divisions and they kind of stand behind and they point at all the stuff that people aren't happy about. And they're like, I'm going to fix all that. Same thing with Trump. Like, we're going to build a wall. We're going to do all these things. But I think they just keep the people fighting. And as long as they're fighting, then they're going to want to pick their hero, their champion, their side that's going to get their stuff done. So I don't really think that's how free people live. in my opinion. That doesn't really sound free to me. And it reminds me a lot of, I don't know if we're getting ahead of it, but it kind of reminds me of Star Wars and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's pretty close down there. Yeah.
Where in between, so the original trilogy, in between the prequels and the original trilogy, because at the end of the prequels, you get Darth Vader, like the birth of Darth Vader. And then in the original trilogy, which is, I know it's confusing, but I'm sure people understand the Star Wars stuff. You get Luke Skywalker and he's fighting Darth Vader. So Darth Vader's been in power for a while. So you have all this time where he's this tyrant and this overlord. And I read a bunch of the books in the 90s and stuff that they had all these authors that were writing stories in between those times. It was really, really good stuff. And what I noticed was they'd go to take over a planet, and instead of just having direct rule over the planet, they would find some kind of governor or somebody from that area and prop him up. And I see the same thing going on in places like Egypt, current day. You have an Egyptian guy over there and he's ruling them, but he's really beholden to what the America or the West basically wants, or what Israel wants, I guess you could say. Can we say that? So he looks brown or whatever, and he talks like you, but he doesn't share the same values as most of the people. Ostensibly he will, he'll champion all these things and stuff. And I'm not really versed in Egyptian politics, so I might be kind of getting this totally wrong, but it's just the metaphor that we're using here. So I think in that same way, that's what happened in the American Revolution. People didn't want to be ruled by the English, so they chose the people that were among them, the rich landowners and the people who are winning. They're like, no, we want you to be our big daddy. We want you to call the shots. We want you to go to Virginia and Maryland and carve out this place that you call District of Columbia and make all these masonry street symbols and crazy obelisks and stuff. We want you guys to have that power.
Because in the end, they want to be ruled over.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it comes down really to like mindset, because people just don't want to take their personal responsibility. They'd rather just, we were talking about this the other day with some people with their kids. They look at sending their kids to school as like a vacation. So say if you're somebody who works from home, you could send your kids to school because then you don't have them there for 8 hours and you don't have to deal with them. There's somebody else's problem. Well, guess what? These days, what they're teaching them, we don't even have to talk about that. I'm sure everybody knows what they're fighting. They're teaching them all this crazy stuff. But even when we went to school, they were still, like we talked about history, they're teaching all these half-truths or maybe straight out lies, or who even knows, to instill in people this indoctrination, or it's an indoctrination method to instill this sense of patriotism of, we were the free ones, we're the best. It's like when I was in the Marines, they're always telling the Marines is the best.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, the Pledge of Allegiance, they would tell us the Marines are the best fighting force in the world, and your guys are the best. And then I'd go talk to some Army guys after I got out of boot camp, and they're like, no, we think we're the best because of this, and that. You guys are just a bunch of dumb grunts. And I'm like, wait a minute, who's really right here?
Yeah,
it's crazy. And it's just like same thing with the cops. If you have a problem, if somebody has a problem with somebody like their neighbor, instead of going over to talk to their neighbor to have a little bit of confrontation, maybe it's uncomfortable. And I'm not saying you should go run over and start a problem, but just to open up a discussion, a lot of people don't want to do that. So they would rather just call the cops and have the cops come and deal with it. And then they claim that they're a free person. It's like, well, how are you free if you're calling the cops? And again, not to demonize the cops. I mean, it's not like I'm a giant fan of the police, but I also know what's waiting if the police, if they defund the police and they go away, it's probably going to be much worse. So I think that's like a step backwards. But I think could it be that's what colonization really is all about? You're not really breaking away from anything. You're just getting your own style of slavery. You could just get to pick it, right? You're installing your own governor or whatever it is, your own archon at the end of the day, your own representative that's going to be your hero, your big daddy that's going to come save the day. I mean, you look at Obama, you look at George W. Bush from 2000 to 2008. All the people on the right were sick of the Clintons and all their craziness. So they're like, we need this other guy. And we get this guy in there and then he just goes and invades Iraq. It's like, it's so crazy. And I think that's exactly what happened during the American Revolution. I mean, if you look at the flag that George Washington was carrying, it was the same flag as the East India Company, basically. You know, it's so if he's running that flag in his banner, you know, that's his banner. Well, then what does that tell you about him? Who is he really representing? I mean, was the British East India Company really revolting from the crown? Is that what's really going on? Or was it a liability shield? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's a perfect example of a liability shield because it's a flag that's not the British flag, but it's still controlled through money, which at the end of the day is just desires, people's own desires and people's own, their inability to face their own desires and to work on that stuff. So it's just another form of slavery, really.
Yeah. And you were talking about people and their gold chains. It's like they love their chains.
Yeah, there's this meme that I saw, and it was like when you'd paint your chains gold, and it just showed like it showed a slave and his chains. He had chains on, but he's painting them gold because now he's proud of his chains. And if you think about people who wear a lot of gold chains and stuff, it's usually like the ghetto culture, you know. It's not just only black people, it's white people too. So I want to make sure I get to pick on everybody. I don't want to just pick on black people because I want everyone.
What about brown people?
Yeah, brown people, you know, it's silly. But this culture of like, I'm going to get all these gold chains, even Italians. I mean, Italians do it a lot too. They always have like their little like Italian horn. You ever see
really?
that? It's like
I
a little
don't know.
squiggly. It looks like a little worm. Well, if you ever see it, it's an Italian horn and they have it on their big gold chains. And it's kind of a great metaphor for slavery because you have this money, because a lot of people that have these gold chains, they can't exactly afford them. And trust me, I buy a lot of things I shouldn't. So I'm not here judging people, right? But it's, you know, are you sending your kids to a government school, but you have all this gold on your neck? Couldn't you use that maybe to, you know, get a better maybe homeschool for your kids or something like that? So it's just this way of they're a slave to their own desire. They're a slave to wanting that status of that, what that gold chain is going to give them.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what that's all about, painting your chains gold.
Yeah. And like, it reminds me of something Fortune Germain was saying on a recent Crow episode 396, where he answers a bunch of questions. But I mean, I was listening to that episode and I think he said it like 3 different times, if I remember correctly. And I'm not just saying that because of like saying things 3 times and what that means, but I literally remember him saying it like 3 different times throughout the whole episode. But he was saying that people didn't just want the devil, like they didn't just invent the devil, but they insisted upon him, like upon having him. It's like, you wanted your own chains, like you wanted your own slavery.
They beg for it at the end of the day, because even people, and this all has to do with psychology, because obviously I don't think most people realize that they're doing this, but they want to be a victim. They want somebody else to blame for their own inability to get up and do things in their own life. You know, I mean, trust me, I did it. I probably still do to this day. So it's not like these are judgments, you know, but you're always looking to point the finger. And that's saying, you know, when you're pointing one finger, there's 4 pointing back at you, or I guess 3. I don't know how your thumb, I guess if you did it like this, but it's so true though, because when you point your finger out at somebody else, unless they have you like captive in their basement and you can't get away, you know what I'm saying? Like, it really is, at the end of the day, it's the individual, it's that own person, the one who's pointing the finger, it's their problem. Like, all their problems are caused by them. A lot of people, you know, like when I was into being a libertarian and being an ANCAP, which is an anarcho-capitalist, which is like, we have to have anarchy because the government's so evil. And I'm not saying I disagree with anything. That's the thing too. It's just like religion, right? There's a lot of truth in there. There's so much truth. But at the end of the day, especially in this country, there's so many ways to get around the government control. And from what I see, people who go and do their own thing, I mean, as long as they're not like advertising it to try to get everybody to do it and all this stuff and start their own like country or whatever, if they're just doing their own thing, usually the government leaves them alone. I feel like the government really is only there for people who need it. Somebody who needs either security net, or they need to be able to call the police all the time, or they need to be able to get the court involved in a dispute, if somebody owes them money or whatever, instead of handling it on a one-on-one basis. They need this archon, I guess I'm going to keep saying at the end of the day, they need this master to come in and settle their dispute. And it's funny because in the society, what I see is either you're behind the 8 ball with your bills and you're living like poor to lower middle class, and you're living week to week, and you're just making ends meet. And what do? All those people are always like, oh, I wish I was rich. And they have this idea of the American dream where, if I work hard enough, I could start my own business and I could be rich and stuff. But the people that I see, because I know some people that are very poor, I know some people who are really rich too. Like I know legit multimillionaires, and they're not happy either. Some people I know are pretty happy with the life they have, but they always either want more or they're a slave to their own desires. Like they have to get a big boat, or they have to get like the newest iPhone all the time, or they have to keep up with the Joneses. And that's another way that they're a slave to their own desires. So they're not free. And even people, I think we talked about this last week, or maybe I was just talking to you about it, but billionaires, people who are billionaires, they're still slaves. Especially if they're not, that's what we're talking about, living in accordance with the golden rule. I mean, you could be a billionaire and not be a slave. You could be living in accordance with natural law, and maybe that's just your karma, is to have all this money, and you have to figure out how to be a person that's living in accordance with the golden rule. You have to, with all this money, and that could be a giant challenge too, because even Jesus said it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to follow me. So what I'm saying is, he's not saying that it's impossible. He's just saying that it's going to be really, really hard. So I think that it's like the grass is always greener on the other side. And if you think about it, in my estimation, money is basically fake. Because I've been saying for years, we all know, most of us know about the fiat system and how money is supposed to represent goods and services. It's not tied to anything physical like it used to be tied to gold and all this stuff. And that was always the worry, like, oh, it's going to crash. It's going to crash. Well, I'm at this point of view now where I think it's all just numbers, but it doesn't matter. They have this way to hold up the system. And yeah, you get a little bit of inflation and gas goes up to $4. But if inflation was true, gold should be like at least 10,000 an ounce, and our dollars would really be worthless. So what I see is this system that's just held up somehow artificially, and people just get this money and they think if they could get more of it, then they're going to win and they're going to be on top. When no, at the end of the day, it's just a total fabricated structure. It's all just fake. And I use money. I'm not like this perfect being who figured it all out. I'm just calling it as I see it. So I think that money's supposed to represent goods and services and all this stuff, but it just is, it's more of a measure of who you are as a person, about how much money you have. That's kind of how it's looked at in the society.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, and I think that to give everyone kind of a solution or how to look at it, it's more about how the true gurus or masters, or you can even say how Jesus approached it, because Jesus never had a Bible. He never told you to get the Bible and look at it. And every time that he talked, that he's quoted in the Bible, he's talking in parables most times. And he's just like this cool dude that's going around and be like, yeah, man, just feed the poor, like,
all right, man.
Episode 1444. So there really is no, in my estimation, there is no way. I don't have all the answers. There is no book for me to tell you to go read. I know what worked for me, but it's like that saying that I always bring up. There's one mountaintop, there's this one peak, and there's just many ways to it.
That's right.
So I think really the only answer is to just work on yourself, and go within. I wrote in my book, shadow work it's kind of like you could just sit in an empty room, or just sit in a room that's quiet with no stimulation, and all the stuff that comes up that you're kind of afraid to deal with or whatever you don't want to face, you start to face that stuff. And I use art to do that a lot. I use music sometimes, just some kind of self-expression, just self-care, taking care of yourself, things like that. But yeah, again, there's really no other example, no other way. That's why I like Ram Dass, because if you look at his life story, he was this guy who was a Harvard professor in psychology, and he was a psychologist, like top of his game. And then he just started doing acid. He just ran into mushrooms. They were like, what the hell is this? And it just gave him a different perspective on life. And he realized that there was more to it. And so he goes to India on this trip with this guy. And then he runs into some guy that was from the West, this like tall blonde guy that he's like, what the hell? And the guy has a robe and he's just walking around to all different temples and stuff. So he just decides to follow him. And he runs into this guy Neem Karoli Baba, or some people call him Maharaji, who was supposed to be this guru, like realized being, somebody who's enlightened, I guess you could say, or whatever. And all the stories that he tells about him is like, he would always say, like, Maharaji, can you just tell me how to raise my Kundalini? Or, can you tell me how to be enlightened? And Maharaji would just be like, just feed everybody, just clothe everybody. He's like,
feed the poor.
Yeah. He's like, to raise my Kundalini, I got to feed the poor. And he's like, he would just give him all these other things to do until he finally figured it out. And one day, the day that he did figure it out, he was like, oh, wait a minute. It's not him. That, Ram Dass in his own mind was saying, it's not this guy. It's not Maharaji. He's not the answer. He's not the way. And that's when Maharaji went over to him and basically told him, you get it now. Like, he's like, yeah, now you get it. Like, it's not about any of that stuff.
Yeah. It's not one person who's the way.
Exactly.
I know Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and life, but I think it was metaphorical and allegorical, basically saying like, the way I live is the way, not me. It's the way I live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like in Buddhism when they say, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Because it's like, if you meet somebody on the road who's saying, they're the one. I am he. I know all these. Yeah. I'm the way. You got to follow me. You got to do what I say. Not that you should kill them, but it's more of a metaphor. Like, go back to 13. We'll tell you about what they mean. But it's like kill that in your own belief system. Mm-hmm. And it has a lot to do with the way we were talking in the episode about religion, about how, in my own example, I was Catholic and then born again Christian and all this stuff. And I was always worried that I was going to go to hell. So I was like, I got to read the Bible. I got to do all this stuff. And it was coming from a place of fear. And I always say to people, are you doing this because it's out of fear? And what does that say? Do you think God wants you to do things out of fear? And I know we've talked about before, and this thing always comes up, like, you should fear God only, but I don't think that's exactly what they meant. I think it's more about, you should fear the repercussions of what God or this whole
maybe
realm, karma, yeah, this whole realm is going to do to you if you don't do this. Like, what's going to keep happening, and stuff like that.
Always wondered what fear God only meant, because it didn't really make sense to me. Of course, you always have the examples of like, well, fear really means like reverence and like respect. And I'm like, okay, that's fine and everything. But then there is also literal fear, like, because then why do they tell you not to fear other things? Like, don't be afraid of those things, but be afraid of God. So that didn't ever make sense. But like what you're saying.
Well, I think this a good way just popped in my head to enunciate it would be, it's more like trust the plan, right? You shouldn't fear anything else, but you should just fear diverging from the plan, because that's when you're going to go astray. That's when you're going to encounter suffering, right? We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but that's exactly what's going to happen. And in this society, being a slave, well, I'll let you finish what you were going to say. Go ahead.
No, you just said something about fear going astray from the plan. And to me, the plan is the golden rule. Like, if you're not going to be aligned with the golden rule / natural law / karma, etc., God's law, whatever you want to call it, that is when you're going to have to be worried that something that, you may not like is going to happen.
Yeah, it comes from fearing what's going on in the exterior world. Like, well, the great example would be all these psyops that are going on. Like, I got to cover my face because I'm afraid. I got to take this test. I got to take this experimental medical serum. I love saying that.
I know you do.
I got to take this injected experimental medical serum because I'm afraid that if I don't, people are going to look at me weird. I'm going to lose my job. My grandmother's going to die, all this stuff. And it's like, do you really think that's goes along with God's plan or karma, forcing somebody to take a injected medical serum that they don't agree with? Do you think that goes along with all that stuff? So these are just questions. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe we're wrong.
Yeah.
But
you just quickly, like you talking about that just makes me think of like how I don't hear I just don't hear the topic of that much anymore. And I think it's a lot of distraction from whatever is going on in other countries right now. I won't even say the names, but it's a total distraction. And I was like reminded of this, or it was just in my face when I went to the grocery store yesterday, the one that I have gone to for a while. And
I even knows the names of all the people that work there. That's how much she is into, so go ahead though. I just wanted people to know.
Yeah. So I went there prior to 2020 and I went there through some of 2020. There was a point in time where I heard that they were being very rigid, let's just say.
They didn't want people showing their smiling faces.
Exactly.
How dare they?
So there was a period of several months where I just didn't even go. I lived and sustained myself off other places that would allow me to show my smiling face. And I didn't go there for several months. So when it seemed like that was kind of like lax and everything was kind of sort of coming back, which was like several months ago, maybe mid 21, or I don't even remember when, but at some point that was happening. However, the employees still had to wear them and cover their faces. So, I was still like bothered by that, but at some point they laxed and some of them were not. Some of them were showing their smiling faces. And I was just like, what happened? So I guess their overlords told them that it was okay. But I guess there were some people who still didn't think it was okay. So they chose to still hide their face. So one time I had the guts to ask one of the cashiers who was not wearing one, because I saw that he seemed kind of begrudgingly, he seemed to have been begrudgingly wearing it the whole time. And so when I saw that he didn't wear it anymore, I was like, yeah, he seemed to not be happy with that whole thing. So I was at the cashier register by myself and I was like, no one was coming. And so I said, hey, why are still some of the employees still wearing them? But I noticed that you're not. So clearly, some people are and some people aren't. He's like, I don't know. Like, in other words, they just want to. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is so weird. He's like, yeah, I know. So fast forward, that was some months ago, maybe some weeks ago. Fast forward to yesterday, I go in, I saw 3 employees who were like constant wearers. And I saw their faces for the first time in like a couple of years, I think. And I was floored. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I just thought to myself, it must be the freaking distraction on the media, because why else would they all of a sudden think it's freaking okay? Like last spring, no one said, oh, it's okay because spring and summer are here. The season is over. So no one's going to get sick. No one still took their stuff off like that. I mean, that was massive. I mean, I I want to, I mean, I don't know. I can't, I wasn't paying attention, but I didn't see very many. Like I saw the majority of people not wearing anything and only a handful of people that did in the grocery store. So it was, it just, sorry, I don't know why it reminded me of that. Where were we?
Well, yesterday I saw a billboard, and it was one of these electric billboards that changes, and it had it had a yellow and blue flag, and it's like, you got to support Ukraine, all this stuff. And the next, it switched before I drove by, and the next one it says, make sure you get your experimental medical serum and get all boosted up and everything, and it's like, what? It's so crazy. But yeah, I noticed that too. A lot of people started just going with the next one, and it's okay now because I think, you see on the news, you see these people are probably not wearing these masks and stuff, but they're talking about supporting this other country now and all this stuff. It's really crazy. And and what we were talking about though is we were talking about how religion, and how the reason I was more into religion and all this stuff and super churchy was because I was afraid. I had fear. And I think it has a lot to do with same thing with government. A lot of people don't break the law because they're afraid to go to jail. Like this guy I used to be roommates with and I'm friends with, he had this unnatural fear of going to jail. I think it's because we used to watch that show Oz on HBO. It was crazy. It was all about like a prison cell block and all this stuff. But he was always like, oh, I'm so afraid I'm going to go to jail and all this stuff. And so I feel like
in jail because he was so afraid. I mean, if you're afraid of something, sometimes it happens to you because you're so afraid of it, right?
Exactly. But also it's like, well, what are you afraid? Like, are you
what are you
not
doing?
Are you not committing crimes because you're afraid to go to jail? Or like now I said in one of the episodes with my new cosmology, I guess you could say, I do what I do because it's out of a place of love and respect, and I want to stay in accordance with natural law and the golden rule and stuff like that, because I know it's the right thing to do, not because I'm afraid of doing it. And I think that parallel with government, most people do what they're supposed to do. Most people pay their taxes because they're afraid they're going to go to jail. That's a great example. I didn't even think about that. Nobody wants to pay their taxes, right? No one's happy to say, oh, I'm paying this money so the roads can get built, the shitty roads that we have,
They're not, that's not what they're doing with them anyway, just so you know.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Yeah, that's a whole
and
other,
by the way, it's volunteer, but you didn't hear it from me.
Allegedly, that's a whole other episode. But yeah, no, you're totally right. But yeah, most people pay their taxes because they're afraid that they're going to go to jail. It's out of fear, not love. And I think that's why power corrupts people, because they're already corrupted inside. So when they get a little bit of power, it's like when you're working somewhere and someone gets a promotion and they have the ability to now tell other people what to do. Sometimes people really let that get to their head. Like I worked at a grocery store when I was younger, and some of these adults, I was like 14, 15, and some of these people were just like, they would yell at people and stuff like that. Like I don't put up with that at all. Like I worked at a car dealership after I was in the Marine Corps, and I was a finance manager, and the general manager was yelling at me one time. And I'm like, dude, as I'm looking down at him, I'm like, bro, I've been yelled at by bigger and badder. I'm like, there's no reason to yell here. And then I actually probably even started yelling. I'm like, oh, you want to yell? Okay, we could start yelling if you want. You're not going to like this. But
nobody should have to yell at anybody for any reason. I mean,
well, there's still reasons to try to yell at people. I think if you got to if someone's really about to cause harm to you or do something like that, maybe,
right.
But in a work environment,
just like if you're trying to discuss something and have a normal discussion, there's no reason to yell.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think that is? Like fear?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the way people are raised through so much violence, and violence happens to them. And I know, like we talked about circumcision and stuff like this, and how when I was raised and I would get spanked or beat or whatever, well, not beat, you know what I mean? Like I would want to then, the first thing in my mind is not to, like, say if I was getting spanked or whatever, to not do something. The first thought wasn't not wanting to do that thing I was supposed to do. It was, I want to get revenge now. I want to do this now. And I think that's what happens to people. They just start to take it out on other people. It's crazy. And I think it's a learned behavior. It's something we learn because of the way that we're raised. People I feel like humans are born more in a perfect natural state, and then all these things happen to us: circumcision, injections, school, indoctrination, all these people yelling at us and stuff like that when we make mistakes. And then we just want that. That's how the cycle kind of gets imprinted and instilled in people. And then they just get indoctrinated, and then they go along with it because that's what they know. And I know I was in there until I had to wake up and figure it all out. Yeah. And again, it goes with the materialism and, with all the food we eat, the television,
media.
Yeah. It's just a big slave system, which again is okay if you want to be a slave. But is that what you want to be? If you're saying you're a free person, if you're claiming that I'm free, I live in the US, well, then act like it. How dare you?
How dare you? So, the next topic we want to discuss is enlightenment. And this topic of the pineal gland is kind of a trendy topic lately, and what calcifies your pineal gland and how to decalcify it, and, blah, 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 blah. You can't reach enlightenment if your pineal gland is calcified, that sort of thing. So,
and you have to open your pineal gland and all this stuff. And I think that's very new agey. And I think that has a lot to do. I'm not saying we don't have like a pineal gland or whatever, but I think that the way of looking at it is very materialistic. It kind of negates the fact that there's like a spiritual element to this realm, that it's like half physical and half spiritual, at least. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's all spiritual when we're just tricking ourselves to think there's even a thing as a physical existence because we just believe it. I'm going to fall through the floor now.
Right.
And somebody who kind of opened me up to that idea was James True. He was talking about pineal gland, and his whole thing was basically that your pineal gland is always open. It's just that, it's just, are you paying attention to it or not? Are you listening to it? Can you hear it? Can you hear your intuition? Can you see what your intuition is trying to tell you? Can you see why what your body's doing? Is it making you sick? Is it giving you cancer? Is it doing all these things to you? And it could have something to do with the way you eat. I think it's allegorical. I think that if you eat in an unhealthy way, or you're watching all this media entertainment, you're watching TV all the time, you're watching all these movies and stuff, I think that it quiets the sound of your intuition. It kind of like blocks it out. It makes it so you don't have to sit in a room quietly and deal with your own thoughts. You could just put them off, and you could just bury it down and push it down. I think that's really what calcifying the pineal gland is all about.
It's ignoring, right? If something continually is happening to you, I think even Fortune was talking about this in one of the recent episodes. The most recent one, not the most, because there's 2 of them out now, but that the one we talked about, 396, I think it was. But now I lost my freaking train of thought.
Listening to yourself? Oh, ignoring. You said ignoring?
Yeah, just keep going. I'll remember.
Okay. Usually it's me that does that, so I feel, see,
yeah, it's okay.
It happens to the best of us, everybody.
It does.
But I think it's another way to be a victim. Well, it's not my fault. They put it in the water. It's in the food. It's all this stuff. Well, how can I help it? There's nothing I can do about it. And then this whole like industry crops up out of it. You get all these new age people. You get people who are selling you all these supplements and stuff. And I'm not saying it's not a good thing to get supplements and to try to eat better and to do all this stuff. But if you think there's this one answer, there's like a one cure all, fix it for all you got to do is get more zinc, or all you got to do is eat peach. What do they call the peach pits? Actually, I heard that's the cure for cancer. But
yeah, Adam will tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, but it's not the one only answer. I think that because the way we are in the society, everyone's looking for, a pill so they don't have to be fat anymore. If they're overweight, they're like, I'll just take these diet pills and then I'll be fine. It's just another way. It's like a Band-Aid, right? On a gaping wound. You just throw this couple Band-Aids on there. But I think if you actually change your life in the way that you look at things, that's kind of how I am. That's why it's not, like I don't eat a lot of meat because I try to only eat meat that I know where it comes from. And, but these are choices that I make, it's not like I don't want to eat meat, or I don't eat a lot of bread or wheat, a lot of processed stuff anyway. And like I was at my brother's house the other day and everyone's eating pizza and they're like, you're not, and I ate a little before I came and I just wasn't hungry. And people are like, you don't like pizza? And it's like, well, it's not that I don't like pizza. It's just that if I eat all this pizza, I'm going to feel like shit,
unless you mill your own grain. I'm gonna start learning how to do that. I mean, like to make my own pizza with my milled grain is what I mean.
Oh yeah, no, see that, and that is another act of self-love because you're taking the time. It's just a better thing to do at your time. You're, instead of sitting in front of a television, you're getting grain, you're milling it, where it comes from, how everything's made, and you're paying tribute to yourself. And I think that your higher self appreciates that at the end of the day, even if it's not the total right thing to do. Say grain still shouldn't be eaten, but at least you're making that effort to be better, to kind of like give yourself a little bit more self-love.
P.S. How dare you? Because you must not have watched the documentary that Adam shared, because it's about how it's actually very healing when you mill your own grain.
I'm not saying that that's allegedly my point of view. I was just, other people's. I can hear other people saying that. Yeah. Which it could be right for them too, and that's another thing. I think when people ask me about what I eat and all this stuff, and I'm like, I think it's just a personal preference. It's a journey. I mean, sometimes, there's no choice. Sometimes there's nothing else to eat and I got to eat whatever I can, but I think that it's more about me choosing to do it and knowing what it is, and doing it from a place of like informed consent, I guess we could say.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And another thing with the pineal gland that we want to talk about, I think it's just another sense that we have. It's like we have the five senses, and then I think it's just an extra sense. It's like the sixth sense. It's the intuition. It's the inner voice. Could it be it's our connection with God? It's the way I think God would speak with us, whatever the heck God is, whatever the hell you are.
Divine source.
Yeah. Everybody has a name for it, the all. Yeah.
Did you just say that? Did we say that at the same time?
We both did say the all at the same time.
Crap.
Holy sync. I guess that's what it is, everybody.
Yeah, it's the all.
You heard it here on the Over Sharon show.
Right. Heard it here first. But you were talking about the it could be another sense.
And to go back to like food and drugs and the behaviors, like the television or addictions or sex or whatever it is, unhealthy addictions and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with sex, but if you're just going around using sex as a distraction or whatever,
escapism.
It's just another form of escapism. And maybe that's really what calcifying the pineal gland is all about. Maybe it's just a metaphor of calcification, because if you think about it, that's what would do it. It's just the calcification that they say is just a good way to put how you're blocking it, but you're just blocking it by what you're doing. And I also think that stuff like that just gets you more locked into the physical realm again, away from the spiritual aspect of what this could be, away from worrying about natural law and karma and all this stuff. You're more centered on yourself, and you're worried about your next, when am I going to get my next meal? When am I going to have sex again? When am I going to get this next, I'm going to watch some TV or whatever it is. It's just like one to the other. And you're really taking no time for yourself, to quiet down and just sit around and kind of see what comes up, from within.
Yeah. And I think you were saying at some point that um like this concept of the pineal gland being open or closed is more of a it's like maybe it's close to your ego, and it's the fact that your ego's not open to it yet.
Yeah,
So
to your
it,
conscious mind, to your conscious brain,
yeah,
it gets closed. Because I think that your higher self sees all, like we were talking about, like Mickey Mouse, right? Like all these, every time, like the Little Mermaid and Aladdin, and there's all these people that they say, I used to watch these videos where you could see like people draw dicks in there, and then there's this one going around now is like a gift card with Mickey and Minnie, and it looks like Mickey Mouse is holding like a giant dildo or whatever, which is supposed to be Minnie's skirt, but it looks like a big dick. So I think you still see that, you still notice that, but consciously you don't. You just go past it, like, oh, that's just Mickey Mouse. So as you engage in it, it just causes more of this cognitive dissonance, and it gets you deeper down this hole. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's a good thing, because I think people have to go deeper until they can hit rock bottom, and then it just doesn't make sense to them anymore. It's like you're digging a hole, you're digging yourself in a hole, and then you hit this concrete, this this like bedrock, if you will, right? And you can't go any further, and that's when your shovel breaks and you realize you can't dig anymore, and you're like, I got to get out of this hole.
yeah.
And that brings
So
us to enlightenment. What is enlightenment? And if you have an open pineal gland, I know what we were talking about before we recorded was how, in my own example, it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, as my point of view shifted, because there's just less fear of different things. And I didn't have to engage in these behaviors I was doing before to make myself feel okay before, because I realized everything is okay. Everything's going to be great.
yeah,
Yeah, and
and
that's really when the bliss comes in, because you could just
yeah,
let go of all these chains, if you will, these things that are holding you down, these desires. And it's not like it's an overnight thing. Sometimes it is for people. One thing you hit and then that's it. But I think that you still, it's like we're always in the present moment dealing with our desires until we could totally overcome them. So I think that's what the work is. It's just working on desires and getting to the bottom of it. Like, what's really causing me to desire this next fix of whatever it is I'm addicted to.
yeah. And it like this reminds me, like the bliss part and stuff reminds me of the episode we just did with Olive Tree Bear with Alex, because when I was speaking to him, he was in that blissful moment, that blissful state. Of course, a couple of days later when we recorded, it was different. There was a different dynamic. He was encountering other things. And so he wasn't in the same space that he was. But like you said, whatever that moment brought him, it brought him bliss. And yes, like you said, it's not an overnight thing. So it's like, he had a rock bottom moment of some sort, and then it brought him this bliss. But then, he was coming down from it a little bit. But at some point it'll ramp back up, because it's not like it's going to be there forever. So maybe it's like down here, and then it comes up, and then it comes down, and it comes up, and then it comes, and then you just keep elevating.
Yeah, you hit like a kind of like a plateau,
Yeah.
and then you go up again. And I think what happens, because in the new age, you hear about people that become enlightened and they're all full of bliss and stuff. And I think people get the wrong idea about it. They just think that everything's going to be all sunshine and roses and fancy, and everything's going to be great, where it's more of, you don't care about it anymore. It's like when you're a child and you're so wrapped up with your baseball cards or whatever it is, or your dolls or whatever. And then when you get older and you discover the opposite sex, and you're like, ooh, now you're interested and you don't care at all about your baseball cards or whatever. Now you're like, you want to get to that next thing. So I think that's more what it's about. It's about understanding and releasing fear. And as you do that, you really are breaking the bonds of your control.
Yeah. And you're constantly upgrading.
Yeah. I think it's
And
just more allegory we were talking about,
yeah.
And it really is about how you view the world, because as it changes, these things that used to be so important to you, like we were saying, they just become less important. So you're focused on higher now. Now you're at the next level, and then you're like, well, how can I attain to the next level? What can I work on? And we talked about the different cycles. You go through like a dark night of the soul, and then you come out of that, and then you have a different perspective on things, and you're kind of a different person. But there's always stuff we can work on that we don't see.
Yeah. I think you had said something about in that moment you can achieve that this world is perfect. And it reminds me of what like Ram Dass talks about that. And there was a video that was sent on Telegram of one of Ram Dass's lectures where he says that. It was like maybe 12 minutes or so long, but it was a really good little overview. And he said that, you know, everything's perfect.
Yeah, like the Tao says, everything's perfect. And I think we've talked about this so many times, but I'll say it again. It's not that you're just like, oh, everything's fine now and I don't have anything to do. It's you could see from a different point of view now how everything that's happening is just a result of what happened in the past. And some people that you see exteriorly in your life that are, you view them as making mistakes and screwing up and fucking up their life, but they just have to know it. They have to gain an understanding, right? An understanding of what this is all about. And they have to see it for themselves. They have to know it. So they have to do all that until they're sick of it, hit that bedrock, their shovel breaks, and then they climb out of the hole, you know? So that's how it's perfect. It's because all the stuff that happened in the past is correcting itself. And again, people are still doing terrible things that are going to create more trauma for people, that are going to continue the cycle, the new babies that are being born and stuff. But at the end of the day, it really is the only way, because another way that, you know, what are you going to like force everybody to do it? You're going to become a dictator and you're going to make all these rules. Well, all rules do is create rule breakers. And then it's just like when you're told not to do something when you're a kid, it's like, that's the first thing you want to do, you know?
Yeah.
Especially if the people telling you to do it are actually engaging in that, you know, like adults, a lot of adult parties I go to, or family parties or whatever they are, just any kind, like weddings, whatever it is, like most people are drinking alcohol, and then they tell the kids not to drink.
Yeah.
You know, and then, well, the kids like, it's like, do as I say, not as I do type of stuff.
Right. And it's like, this is a drink for mommy and daddy. It's not for little children. So they're like, well, I want to be, you know, an adult.
Yeah. Because kids at the end of the day, everybody's just a being, you know, so they want to be like the people around them, you know, they want to be cool and big shot, and I want to drink beer, you know,
do what everyone else is doing.
Exactly.
Right?
And it goes back to these people who say that they're enlightened and stuff. It's just like in Christianity when people say that they're saved. You know, Jesus has saved me. I believe in Jesus, so I can do whatever I want. I think it's the same kind of
once saved, always saved
inversion. You know, I got baptized, I read the Bible, I'm fine. I tell everybody else that they need to know Jesus too, so I'll be fine. And I think it's just kind of the same thing. Religion and government, there's a lot of overlap, because in my mind, it's all mind control.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mind control. Well, the next thing we want to talk about in this, along the same lines of like enlightenment and stuff like this, would be breatharianism. And how some people allegedly could just not eat food. They just either live off their air, they sun gaze, they get their energy that way. Maybe they'll drink a little water or whatever, or sometimes have like a fruit that fell from a tree or something like that. You know, they're like, and I think a lot of that stuff has to do with connecting more to the spiritual aspects of what this realm is about. I think it has a lot more to do with your belief system. And Fortune de Saint Germain, that was on Crow, he was talking about how his ancestor, well, he talks about how his ancestor was Saint Germain, like 10 generations ago in the 1700s. There was this guy, and he was claiming that he was a breatharian, that he wouldn't go, and it's written a bunch of places too, that he didn't eat food, or he wouldn't go to these feasts and stuff. And when I heard that, it kind of blew my mind a little bit, because I've been a real big Tolkien fan lately, or nerd. and I was listening to a lot of stuff. And I was listening to Lord of the Rings, when Frodo goes to Rivendell and he's hurt, he got stabbed, and they have to bring him there and heal him and all this stuff. And when he wakes up, there's this big feast. And then after the feast, he goes into this room where everyone tells stories and stuff. And he sees this guy sitting by the fire, and it was Bilbo. And he's like, Bilbo, why weren't you at the feast? And he's like, I'm not really in for things like that these days. And it kind of blew my mind. I'm like, well, what if Bilbo was like a breatharian? Like, what if that's what Tolkien was kind of trying to hide in there? Maybe he didn't realize he was doing it. Maybe it's just something that happens subconsciously, right? It just came through to him to write it in that way, because he also declined to go to the feasts. And I don't think you see him or hear him talking about eating or anything like that from then on. And he lives to be like 130 years old. So, it had a lot to do with, I guess, what the ring did to him, but maybe he was able to give the ring away, and he was able to just hand it off to Gandalf. So he overcame that, something that Gollum could never do. Gollum could never do that. I mean, he was the one who seized the ring at the last minute and fell into the fire. So I think because Bilbo was able to overcome and transcend it, that maybe he didn't have to eat anymore. He was more like the elves, because the elves didn't have to eat either. I mean, they still did, but they didn't have to. They couldn't. An elf wouldn't die if he was starved. He would just be very uncomfortable or whatever, allegedly. But
something that he said. I'm just going back to Fortune Saint Germain talking about stuff in that Q&A episode, and he said something about dematerialization and stuff like that. And I know I've talked about it before, where I just jokingly say, that's how I want to leave this. He was saying basically that, because somebody asked, well, how can you learn how to dematerialize? And he was saying, like, you don't want, like, basically not just anyone can do this. You have to be what do you call it? Enlightened. Like, you have to be one of those really enlightened individuals that's like basically gone beyond, like leveled up all the way pretty much to the top. And but he said, like, it's like I got the feeling that once you do that, it's not like you come back, but if you do, like, you could be coming back as another person or something to that effect. But I just wanted to clarify that, when the way I was saying it was, I was like, I want to get to that enlightenment so I can decide when I want to leave, kind of like Saint Germain did.
She wants to go out like Yoda, like Obi-Wan, just kind of dematerialize and become part of the realm or whatever it is, or just the ether, go back into it. And it's funny because when whoever asked that question, when they put it to Fortune said 3 times that it's not possible anymore. And then he's like, which is great because he said it 3 times. But he did say, if you're at that level of consciousness, at that level, like the Christ consciousness, the Christos. And I think that really all does have to do with belief, because if you get to that point, then your perspective is you believe it's possible, and then you're able to do it. Because I really think this whole realm works on belief system. And that's how breatharians are able to do it. There's this video of this guy that was an alleged breatharian going around. He's this crazy, like, really tall, skinny looking black dude. He just looked like he was nuts. And the way he talked, and most people thought he was crazy. But the thing is, if you think about it, I think crazy people would have a better chance of doing that, because they can convince themselves that it's real,
believe it,
and truly believe it. And now we watched a more recent video of the guy, and he says he eats like a double, or like a double cheeseburger every day or something like that, or a quarter pounder.
He basically eats a McDonald's hamburger and something else every, like, and the Coke and the Diet Coke.
Oh, and a Diet Coke. And he's like, yeah, you got to have the Diet Coke. And most people would be like, that is nuts. That's the worst thing you can put in your body. But he convinced himself
that it was okay,
that it's the manna of the heavens, that it's from God or whatever. So I think because he convinced himself that, then he made it that in his life. Could it be, And we were talking about fruitarianism a little bit, fruitarian, however you say that word, fruitarianism. Fruitarian. And, Fortune Day Saint Germain was talking about how some monks that are breatharians, sometimes they just eat a fruit that fell off a tree or whatever. And that kind of hit me, because if you are eating that, that's got to be one of the lowest forms of karma building. You're not destroying any plants. You're just taking a fruit that probably would have rotted anyway, because most fruit don't yield another, most seeds, I would say, more than not, actually will grow another species, I guess, unless it's bamboo, because that stuff is crazy. But so they're looking at it from a point of view of they're not harming anything. They're not building more karma in this world, so they're just kind of taking the fruits of the tree.
Was it Fortune who said that? I didn't even remember him saying. Maybe he did. I don't remember.
Yeah, he was saying that about monks or people or breatharians, breatharianism.
Okay.
He's saying that sometimes people will do that. And another thing that he brought up, which is pretty cool, is that this universe isn't about punishment. There really is no direct punishment. It's more about suffering. So based on the choices that you make, you just have to endure different suffering. And I think suffering in that way is like, it's the key. It's the guideline. So if you're suffering, you can look into the suffering, and you could kind of deduce why you're in the situation you're in and why you're suffering. Why are these things happening to me? What choices am I making to bring this upon me? And then you can actually make different choices, and then you could learn to live. Like he said, we're here to learn lessons. And I know we're talking about this guy a lot, and it's not like we think he's our new Jesus or our new God or anything. A lot of what he was saying was resonating with me. And he was saying how this place is just a place to learn different lessons, and you can learn them through suffering, or you can learn them through joy. And I'm really more about learning things through joy.
And laughter, because laughter is the best medicine.
Exactly. And
allegedly,
I say that all the time. I think laughing is really is the best medicine. Look at Patch Adams. We were just talking about that in the last episode.
I never saw that movie.
If you could just get people to laugh. I don't remember the whole movie. I just remember that he was a clown in a hospital making kids laugh.
Oh, okay.
So I think that it was that part of it could be very healing for people. Yeah, very cool. Well, but we're coming up on Easter, aren't we? Easter.
I don't know, because okay, so here's the funny thing about Easter for me is even though I grew up in church and everything, and even though Easter Sunday was like a thing, but it wasn't like, I didn't feel like I got super involved or anything like that, or super like, I don't know. I guess my church, it was just like, oh, it's Resurrection Sunday.
How dare you? You didn't wear your Jesus t-shirt? You didn't wear your Jesus jersey?
We're supposed to wear like Easter
number 777.
Hello.
Got Jesus on the back.
Jesus on the inside.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, yeah, tomorrow will be, when people view this, tomorrow's going to be Good Friday.
Oh, okay.
Which is the day that Jesus was allegedly
crucified. Yeah.
So I think a lot of people that watch this show, unless you just came across it by mistake and you're still listening, which is thank you, but I hope we don't offend you. But people that are more, I would say, churchian or believe more in the literal definition of the Bible. And again, I've always said a million times, like it could be both. I'm sure it probably is something. Again, the story isn't what we were told, I'm sure, exactly, but somebody probably lived that life very close to him and maybe was killed in a way or crucified. But yeah, so a lot of people that watch this are probably over Easter and over all these holidays, and they're like, oh, I don't want to have to deal with all this stuff. But we wanted to talk about a way that you can live by the golden rule on Easter, and you could still enjoy it, and you could still not be a buzzkill to people who are drinking their Jesus juice and wearing their Jesus jerseys, because at the end of the day, it really is a beautiful story if you look at it, and it's about overcoming physical death. And it's kind of like a nod to say there's more than this. And if you have belief that you could get through this stuff, and we are going to go to a better place after we die, allegedly. And
we could, if we choose, if we so choose.
Yeah. I mean, even
something else that Fortune was talking about too. That was.
Oh yeah. With the light. Don't go toward the light, Carol Ann.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's this movie Poltergeist that was like a big horror movie in the 80s. And there's this little girl in it that gets lost and she's like in the other side or whatever. So they bring this medium in, and she's trying to find him, and the medium keeps saying to her, Carol Ann, come towards the light, go towards the light.
There
So
you go. Isn't that, there's truth to that. So to come back to this realm, you go toward the light. And he said, if you don't, you can stay, you choose, you can stay in the void, and you can create and manifest there in the void. You can,
one
you can
important
go
thing he
anywhere
said
you
though
want.
was if you do it without fear, because I think
Yeah, exactly.
there could be a way to get trapped or something or whatever, get into this void, but it's out of fear. And then you're like this spirit who's like unresolved or whatever. Maybe that's how ghosts are made, if they're things.
Could
But
be, yeah, very interesting thought. Yeah.
so I think what he was saying was, if you have fear and you rush toward the light, then you'll probably come back to this realm. But if you turn away from the light and you look into the void and without fear, then you're able to create, or maybe go to a different place, or who knows what, maybe the next level. I'm not really sure, but I know that even the I think it's the Hindus, they talk about when you die that you should focus on God, you should focus on Ram, because allegedly even when Gandhi was shot, he was just like chanting Ram. He's just like Ram, 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 like his mantra. And Ram is God. Basically, it's like the name of God in Hinduism. So he just kept his mind, and that really is to be without fear, to go on to the next plane or level of existence. Because so many people die in fear, if you think about it. Like,
right.
When people die, it's such a fearful thing. People are so scared. So if you're bringing that fear with you, where do you think you're going to end up? Who knows?
Oh my gosh, that makes me think a couple of things. So number one, it makes me think of Wesley, my late husband, when he passed away. And I don't think he had fear anymore, because there were maybe a month or two prior to, maybe several months prior to him passing, he was looking into near-death experiences, and people in hospitals, like nurses, explaining what they saw the patients going through on their last, minutes, day, seconds, whatever. And he told me that he was looking into that, and I kind of was just like, well, he's just curious about it. I didn't think it was because he probably knew he was, on his way, and didn't, want to tell me that, but he was, but he had a level of fear about it. He had a little bit of fear about it. But when I asked, I didn't say this part when I was telling the story, but when I asked him if he was ready, I told him, are you ready to go with Jesus? Because, I was Christian at the time. So I said, are you ready to go with Jesus? And he said, yeah. So like,
I think that's great. Then he didn't exit this realm full of fear. That's got to count for something.
I totally don't think he did. I think it made sense to him. Like, he was going to a good place. So, but it made me think of that. And then it also made me think of the story in the New Testament of Stephen, when he was being stoned to death, he like blissfully left the realm, because he looked into heaven. He's like, can you see the angels? Like, can you see them? And so like, it's just like we talked about when we were talking about the death episodes. In the death episodes, I was saying, like, just let it be blissful for me. Like, don't let me experience any pain or suffering or anything like that. It just made me think of Stephen right now in the Bible.
Well, I think that, could it be that it's up to you then to not feel the pain and the fear,
It is. Good point. Very valid point.
So maybe you don't have to dematerialize, maybe you just don't have to be afraid.
Yeah.
And,
but dematerializing is still, I think, the best.
Yeah. I'm not saying it would be great.
Why not like, attain for the best, And,
oh yeah. No, I hear you. But just in case you don't, just don't have fear. That's all. And speaking of fear,
good call.
Getting back to Easter, I think you can use it, or I'm going to use it as an exercise. I'm not going to try to woke rape people about the Egyptian fertility goddess and all this stuff and eggs.
does it really matter? Because it's like the pagans celebrated fertility around this time. Pagans and heathens were actually one with the realm, one with the earth, with nature. So they were living according to natural law. So they're like, noticing that bunnies have lots of babies and noticing that eggs were a representation of fertility. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a representation of like a resurrection of like the blooming and everything that's coming back after the winter solstice that just happened, right? It's supposed to be equinox. Of course, as Crow has talked about it, it's been shifted because of the Gregorian calendar that was placed in whatever year that was, because I'm terrible with history and dates and all that crap.
Yeah, well, you never want
allegedly.
You never want a slave. If you're gonna have a bunch of slaves, you don't. If you could, I'll put it this way. A great example would be like in boot camp. Nobody had a watch. We never knew what time it was in boot camp. We just had to rely on them. So if you could get people to not even know what the correct time is of the year of the season, then you can really do a number on them. And since people have been doing it forever, there's going to be something inside you that knows it's true. There's no lie in nature. So they just invert it and they move it a little bit just to keep you a little bit off your game. And what I was talking about is like previously in Easter's before, not probably anytime recently, but a few years ago, I would bring that up to people or share the memes like about, oh, all you Christians don't, you're just representing a pagan holiday and all this stuff. But instead of being this buzzkill, I can use Easter as an exercise to not judge people and to not have fear that the people around me aren't validating me because of their belief system. I'm not getting any validation from them. And then it could lead me to judge them for why are you? But instead of that, I could just look at, wow, it's a great time for people to get together, to see their family, to share a good meal, to have some time off of work or whatever it is, just a nice break. Because a lot of people get like Good Friday off and stuff like that. So I think that that's how I'm going to try to approach this Easter this year.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a good exercise for people, like I said, because people that watch this show, they probably already know a lot of that stuff, and they might have a little bit of judgment. So instead of judging people, why don't you just quit being a fucking buzzkill and color some eggs?
God damn it. Sorry. Just kidding. But
gosh darn it all, the heck, cheese and rice. Cheese and rice.
Just to go back a little bit to what I was saying earlier about not knowing when things were happening or anything. Just like I lived under a rock with everything else, I lived kind of under a rock with all the dates and like Easter for me wasn't any more special than like, I don't know, it just wasn't for me. And maybe it's kind of was for my church and my family a little bit, but the only difference was that we had like a sunrise service. And so like you could go to the 5 or 6 a.m. service. And it's like, I didn't want to wake up that damn early. So I think my parents sometimes would go to that one and then they'd come back home, pick us up. And then we'd go to, because there were always multiple ones. So it'd be like on that day, it would be like a sunrise one. And then like later on, they'd have like the normal one. So I just didn't feel like it was, that, to me, it wasn't that big a deal. And since my church didn't celebrate the pagan version, which was like eggs and bunnies and stuff like that, then I didn't get exposed to that. So speaking of that, I did go through my moment of that whole like being judgmental about stuff because through early 2020 and through like for a good 9 months to a year, I was looking into started in late 2019. And for a good year, I was looking into Torah observance stuff because that was kind of in my whatever I was looking at, that's kind of what was coming out at the time. So because of people like Rob Skiba and Zen Garcia, whom I was watching at the time, because of the flat earth stuff. And so I got it. They were talking about Torah observant type things. And so they were like, oh, Easter's a pagan holiday. Christmas is a pagan holiday. And they were exposing all these truths or whatever. according to them, their truth, because they are pagan holidays, but like that doesn't
Like
mean
woke raping though,
but
right?
they were demonizing them. In other words, they were making them evil and horrible. And so at the time I was kind of like skewed by that. And I was like, oh, really? So I kind of was hesitant. I kind of backed off the celebration of holidays for like a year. And I didn't really, I think one year, I think it must have been 2020. It had to be, yeah, it was 2020. Instead of Easter, not that I wasn't, were they doing anything in Easter in 2020? Yeah, I wasn't even going to that church anymore because I had like stopped going to that, right? So in 2020, I instead of celebrating Easter, I celebrated Passover very mildly. Like Andreas and I just cooked up some lamb chops and, had a salad, and I made some like unleavened bread, but that was it. I mean, like, that's
very
about
mildly, we slaughtered a lamb. We put the blood above our, not a big deal. We just put the blood above our door.
Yeah, dude, the stuff I was watching at the time was very radical. Well, to me it was, because I was like, they were like, yeah, even if you're not going to do that, like you can like mimic it. You can take a little bowl and take your children outside and you can pretend like you're wiping, taking the blood and putting it on your door things. And I'm just like, that sounds weird. I'm just going to have some lamb, a salad, and some unleavened bread that I made. And that's about it, I think. But yeah, I did that one year. And then after that, I was like, I think it's all bullshit. Like, cause I just see that there's a lot of other things, that are more important than that. But
well, people do a lot crazier things. So,
yeah.
Oh, well, now
That
we
was my
want
little phase. But go ahead.
Well, the last thing we're going to talk about is our own, I guess, aperture or point of view, where we are, how we view the world, our view on death, what this universe could be. And well, actually, one thing I wanted to say about Easter, I didn't want to interrupt you though, but you were saying all the Easter at that church you used to go to, they have the sunrise mass and masses all day. I was going to be like, yeah, it's a big money making day for those guys, I'm sure, right? Like, it's one of their big days. It's like a bar holiday, like St. Patrick's Day or whatever,
the bars, multiple times, so you can put multiple more amounts of money in the the basket every time.
Plus they get all the people that hardly ever go out. They go out for the big holidays. So that's what, like the midnight mass, they're probably killing it. The Catholics, they're like, yeah, this is our big day. We're going to get some sweet robes after this.
And people who wear robes.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah, that's a funny one. They definitely like to have sex. Like, why do we even have to take our pants off? So yeah, it's just another Owen Benjamin joke. It was Dinah. I think that, I think a lot of different theories about what this realm could be strike really close to what it is or what it could be. Even things like simulation theory, even though I don't think simulation theory, which is everyone says we're kind of like in a computer program or whatever, or some kind of program or like the Matrix we're plugged into. We have a physical body somewhere else, and this is just like all a construct. I think that parts of that could be true. I think that this realm could be, like as Fortune was saying, it's a place for us to learn. So it is possible that we did make an agreement to come here, and it's also possible that our consciousness is one, and maybe we were this or are this powerful being altogether that needs to go through this experience. And this is one way that it could be done, where we could be tested and know a bunch of different things until we can go to the next level. So I think that, especially if you look into like the firmament and people's different representations of what this realm could be, I think there could be either other ones that are around. It's like a bubble. And then there's just other ones that you could either maybe you go through one and then you have to go through another and you have to go through another, something like that. Or maybe this is just the one that there is and you just keep recycling through this until you kind of figure it out and then you could go to the next level. But that's kind of where I'm at with this whole stuff. So, but the thing I like about it is it's not anything that have to do with fear, because I'm not afraid, because I realized that at some point I really believe it was a choice that I consciously made to come here and to incarnate into this body and to be subject to the whims of this world in order to learn what I have to learn to get on to the next thing. That's why I'm not afraid of death. I don't have that fear really. I mean, I don't want to die or anything like that. But even when I tell that story about a couple weeks ago, how I almost drowned, and I made that decision that I was like, all right, well, if this is it, then I guess this is it, but I'm still going to keep going and give up. So there wasn't that fear. So if I was consumed by the waves that day and I died, it wouldn't have been out of a place of fear. I wouldn't have been panicking and freaking out. And I wouldn't have came into the next, whatever you go next with this, it's like when you wake up from a dream that was so real and you're sweating and you still have that anxiety or fear or whatever it is, and you carry it. And sometimes it can even affect your whole day. But I've had like a really good dream, and then the next day I have a great day because of it, and I'm still thinking about it and stuff like that. So I think that comes closer to what it is, I guess. So that's my view in a nutshell. What do you think, Sharon?
Yeah, so we've talked about this a little bit in different episodes. I feel like 2020 would really catapulted me into the new way of my seeing this realm. And it's like only been in the last, 9 months to a year that I've really begun to open my aperture to what this world could possibly be. And at this time, I do see the concept of the concepts we've been talking about throughout this episode, which is that you can when you pass from this realm, you can choose to come back, or you can choose to go somewhere else. Just because I've seen it in so many different from so many different perspectives. I mean, I hear Fortune St. Germain talking about it, but I was listening to the Kybalion because Brandon shared that the other day, and I had kept telling myself I need to listen to this. I'm only halfway through it, but still, I mean, I really want to finish it, and it's really good. But it just really, these hermetic principles that it's talking about really helped me make sense of things. And it wasn't just that, but like when Brandon talked to me about the Tao Te Ching back, probably 9 months ago, and when I first started hearing it and hearing about it, that also had an effect on me and opened my aperture some more. So a lot of these books, I'm trying to think of other books too, that have
Bhagavad Gita.
The Bhagavad Gita. Oh my gosh, that one they're all good, but it's just, that one is amazing. And I have finished that one. Now I'm kind of on the second reading through it. But all these things just make me aware that a lot of things that are what we've been told about religion, what we've been told about a lot of things about history, but especially religion. I no longer see things the way I used to see them. I don't feel indoctrinated because I've wiped the slate clean of what I've ever been told about things. So I can look at them under a new light, and these concepts of reincarnation, past lives, living past lives with people, making these contracts with them that we're going to come into this realm and do certain things to learn from each other, whether one is going to behave in a certain way to teach us a lesson about something. That exchange, to me, that seems like it makes a lot more sense. And then just doing this over and over until we get to the place where we transmute all the karmic debt or whatever you want to call it for ourselves and potentially for our ancestors and people around us. And we can ascend, become enlightened. And when we leave this realm, potentially either not come back or come back as what some people call bodhisattva, which is someone who comes back to help people, or become an ascended master or something, right? But these concepts now make a lot more sense to me. And I was never privy to this information when I was younger, because I was indoctrinated in a church. And so I wasn't allowed to look into these sorts of topics. I was feared into no, don't look at the Buddhist stuff. Don't look at the Hindu stuff. Don't look at the, Chinese stuff or whatever. Don't look into anything because it's all evil and only Jesus can save you. And it's just all people's perspectives and people's bent on something. And to me, it makes way more sense now that all of these different belief systems have truth. And I feel like the one that's the worst at it is Christianity, because they're the ones that are bent on there's only one way. And I feel like a lot of other Muslims probably are the same way. There's only one way, right? But I feel like probably Jews too. So all the three major ones. But I feel like other belief systems, not that I've studied them, but just the stuff that I read from them, it's like they're not as, and they're not, I wouldn't say as, they're just not judgmental about people and how they're living their lives in that regard. Like, oh, you're a Christian, you're going to some other realm. But it's like they don't even have that in their, that's not even something that they even, I don't think they have. Is there like a heaven, hell in like Buddhism or Taoism or Hinduism? I don't think there is. You know what I mean?
There's it's more about like reincarnation and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, so, yeah. I hear you. Go ahead.
But one thing that I wanted to say that's changed for me is this, and we've talked about it many times. And I could, I always reserve the right to be wrong. And even if I don't say it, if I sound claimy, it's just because that's where I'm at the moment. But it doesn't mean that that's always going to be the way it's going to be. And one example that just happened was, okay, so I was being a bit claimy about like, I just don't think there's a such thing as demons. Okay, fine. Let's say there are demons. Well, I can't remember if it was Fortune or somebody recently said something to the effect of that they could be, and I can't remember the exact details, but the way they explained it, it kind of triggered me to think, okay, so the way I was thinking about demons and the devil and stuff, because I truly don't think there is a devil or a Satan. I still hold that because it doesn't make sense that there would just be this one creature that was just the most evil, that blah, 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 right? Okay, but could there be entities that are not necessarily of this realm, but like somehow can influence potentially? Now I'm more open to the idea because of, I think it was something Fortune Saint Germain said. But the reason that I'm more open to it is that I was just thinking to myself, well, it doesn't make sense that, that they would exist, because then you'd have somebody to blame. You could always just be like, well, the demon made me do it and stuff. Like, well, that doesn't mean that they don't exist. I mean, I don't know, right? So, but the thing is, you still have choice. Like, even if a demon is like telling you to do something over here and you have an alleged angel, base, which to me is just silly in itself, because the two words are basically the same thing. Demon was actually a messenger, and that's what angel is. They're basically the same. It's the same word, but they've, dare I say, demonized the word demon to make it evil, right? They put a bent on it, but it's just a messenger. They're just messengers. But anyway, let's just say that there are these things, and one of them's telling you to do something bad over here, and one's telling you to do something good over here. Personally, I think it's really comes from the desires of your own heart, just like it says in the book of James. But still, let's just say, for all intents and purposes, there are these two entities telling you. You still have to make a choice. It's still your choice. So you can't blame anybody. You know?
What he said that I liked was that you have to still invite it in.
Exactly. Thank you for reminding me, because I can't remember. What else did he say? Can you remember?
Well, I just in regards to like black magic and evil and all these things, there could be entities from other realm dimensions.
Yeah.
Maybe higher dimensions or whatever that could influence us. But I think you have to call it into your life consciously. And you could do it. You could still do it subconsciously by engaging in all this escapism and doing all these things. Or you could maybe conjure it. Maybe you could conjure some power to help you. But again, the devil or the evil or whatever it is, it's not anything that creates. It only inverts. It only corrupts. So I think you have to call it in, because the way that we're taught through a lot of our media and movies and stuff is like you could just become possessed and there's nothing you could do about it. Like one day a demon just possesses you. I think that's what you're talking about. Like
yes.
And I don't
reminding me. That's what he was talking about.
And I think that's really that is really key, because that will eliminate the victim consciousness part of it. It's not that you weren't what was the word that I just used? You weren't possessed against your will. It was because the roads you were going down, because the things that you were doing, you called it into your life.
Yeah. By the things you were doing, by the things you were thinking and actively going toward.
Right? It's like when they say not to talk about certain things, like speaking things into existence. It's the same kind of, if you ask for help, it'll come to you, but you might not want that help. Like selling your soul to the devil or like a demon, so you could be like a rock star. It's the same kind of metaphor, where it doesn't mean you're going to go to hell. It just means that you're going to now experience all the suffering that comes along with what you thought you wanted.
Right. One thing I did write down that he said, which I really loved, was that there are no victims, only volunteers.
Yeah, I like that. That's great. And if to close this episode, I think we should talk about the different practices that he talks about doing. I think that's really, if you're gonna listen to that episode, really focus in on the different practices he talks about in the meditations and the prayers and the alchemy, the true spiritual alchemy that you can do. I think that's really the takeaway, because there's all these questions that it's like a child would have a lot of these different questions about like what the realm could be, or what's after death, or how do I do this and how do I do that, when it's like, if you want to learn how to be an alchemist or maybe be like this guy or whatever, there's certain steps. And then once you get to these steps, that other stuff doesn't even matter anymore. You're just like, it's like we were saying before, once you hit that plateau, you don't care about baseball cards anymore, because there's some hot girl sitting next to you on the bus and you're worried about that. You know what I mean? So I think in that same way, when you get to the next level of understanding, or you start to have these epiphanies and you start to have these shifts in your aperture, a lot of that stuff doesn't bother you anymore. I think a lot of that stuff comes out of fear. And that's what I was going to say before. Could it be that this realm is just about overcoming fear and judgment?
Yes.
Of other people,
Absolutely. Holy smokes.
Because especially if when you go to the next plane without fear, you could pick what you want to do or whatever it is. It's maybe that's the key. It's without fear. Maybe you have to overcome fear. All right, everybody, we're going to give you that to chew on until next week.
Right. Well, that makes me think of Wesley too, because he went without fear.
Exactly. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to listen to any Crow episodes or get into any rabbit holes or anything. He just intuitively figured it out and wasn't afraid. Maybe because in his past incarnation, he had dealt with a lot of this stuff. So who knows how it works? I don't know,
Yeah.
you know?
And just to let you guys know which episodes were the ones that were Fortune Saint Germain. Episode 352 was the first one he did with him. Episode 388 was the second episode he did with him. And then the most recent is 396. And I think there's an even more recent one, which is probably 397, I'm going to guess, where he's going to continue answering questions.
Yeah, I know he was definitely coming back to answer more questions. I'm just not sure when it's going to be. But yeah, I would definitely check those episodes out. And like I said, to me, the most important out of all that stuff was those exercises, you know, that because the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, because those are the exercises are in the two first ones I mentioned.
Yeah, 352 and 388. So yeah, go through those, or if you want, hit us up and ask us about it. Because I just was listening to one and I wrote down all that stuff. I was like pausing it, writing it down, pausing it. Yeah, so I transcribed all those, so I have them. Maybe we should put them up in our oversharing group. That might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, you could if we could. Yeah,
cool. If people don't understand my chicken scratch, or maybe I'll send it to you and you could type it up nice or something.
I thought you had typed it. You chicken.
Oh, I like to write things because I feel like when you write it,
you learn more. I get it.
Yeah, when you write it with your hand, you know what I mean? Absolutely. It's like, because I take the time to make sure it's neat. I'm writing on a paper without lines, so I'm trying to keep it all looking good. And yeah, that's the way I do it, baby. That's how we do it. That's how we do it here on the Oversharing Show. We'd like to thank our chat.
This is how we do it.
This is how we do it. Boom, 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 boom.
So we were gonna sing. See, we added the singing. We just always do.
We sing. We're very musical people. We're a musical people. You know what I'm saying?
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, all right, everybody. Well, thank you guys for listening to the Oversharing Show. Again, thank you to our chat. You guys are the best. It's the favorite day of the week for me is my Thursday nights, when I just get to chill out and watch myself talk, and then also talk to my friends. So thank you guys. Make sure you share the show around with people you think that might get something out of it. And
shout out to Care Bear. Librarian Bear.
Yeah, for sure. Our biggest fan. And make sure that you shout out to Quiet Sparky Bear. I went hiking with him and his family last Saturday, but by the time we watch this, it'll be a few Saturdays, but had a really good time. So thank you guys so much for coming to us and hanging out in the woods in Guilford, Connecticut. It was so much fun at Westwoods. It's one of my favorite hiking spots ever.
And shout out to Kaylee, because we forgot to mention her last time.
Oh yeah, as one of our fans. Yeah, my friend Kaylee, that's in Australia, the crazy Brit living in Australia with her crazy. We're supposed to be recording something soon. It's tough because it's like a 13-hour difference. So like
that's tough.
Yeah, but we'll get it together though. Don't worry. We'll have some content coming out pretty soon. Yeah. Is there anything else, Sharon, that you wanted to say to people?
No, except that if you're not oversharing,
then you're totally not caring.
That's right.
That's right. So overshare and share on. Yeah. Bye, everybody.